Hi, boys and girls. This is Miss Beatty. Our reading lesson this week will actually be a combination of some things we've already been doing. We're going to put it all together for a project. It will be reading, writing, and social studies. It's going to be a culture research project. So, good readers read text carefully and reread important parts. Now, I'm really talking about nonfiction texts here because when I'm doing research, I usually stick to nonfiction books to help me get some real facts and information. Do you remember at the beginning of the year in our EL unit, we learned about schools around the world? We're going to take a look at that from another source this time. We're going to use PebbleGo and read about school around the world. So I'm going to sign into PebbleGo and take a look at this section, School Around the World. So you can see that we have 5 tabs here. So we're going to read each section carefully, paying attention to the information that we hear when we read. Everyone goes to school. Children around the world go to school to learn. Math, reading, science, and writing are taught nearly everywhere. Most schools teach history. In many areas, kids also study music and art. Schooldays is the next tab. In the United States and Russia, a school year lasts from September to May. Students in Guatemala go to school from January to October. In Egypt, many students study for only half of each day. So I know that this section is talking about what times of the year and how much of the day students go. In the Special Schools tab, it says, not all schools are the same. In Afghanistan, some schools are taught by mullahs. In Rwanda, some schools have classes outside. In Australia's outback, kids listen to teachers on the radio and mail in their homework. So I'm wondering about a couple of words. I'll use our context clues idea from last week and think about the word mullah. It says some schools are taught by mullahs. There's not a lot of context around to help me understand. I would think that that's probably someone special in the community that helps with teaching. And then there's a highlighted word in red, outback. It says in Australia's outback, kids listen to teachers on the radio and mail in their homework. So with the word being outback, I'm thinking that must mean it might be somewhere far out, and that's why the kids would have to listen to the teacher and mail in their homework. In this section, it says most schools teach the country's national language. Schools in Ireland teach English and Gaelic. Schools in Guatemala teach Spanish and Mayan. English as a second language is taught in many countries. So that's talking about what languages are taught in some schools. Schools in some countries teach special subjects. In Finland, kids must study music until they are 14 years old. Schools in South Korea teach morals. In Venezuela, students learn about technology. So I'm going to go back now. And let's think about the lessons we had earlier in our reading lessons a few weeks ago about main idea and supporting details. So I just read lots of details about schools around the world. And I want to sort of put those together to think about what's the main idea? What was I really learning about schools in other parts of the world? So remember the hand with 5 fingers for 5 details. And I'm going to think about the details that I just read. So on the first page, I read about children around the world going to school and the subjects that they read. Math and reading and science and writing, those are very common. And history, and then sometimes kids learn about music and art as well. So a detail I can get from that, if I put that in my own words, I might say something like, students learn math, reading, and science and writing in nearly all schools. So that's something common that happens all around the world. In the next section, it talked about how in the United States and Russia, a school year lasts from September to May, and then in other countries of the world, school years are in different months or different parts of the day. So I want to take that information and put it in my own words for a second detail. So I might say something like, the school year lasts from September to May in the United States and Russia. So that takes that first detail but changes it up a little bit in my own words. The third section was talking about different types of schools. It talked about schools being different, taught by different people, held in different places. And so the part about the outback was pretty interesting because that's similar to what we're doing now with the way learning doesn't always happen in a classroom. So I'm going to say some teachers in Australia use the radio to teach students who live in the outback because they're not able to actually come to the classroom. The next section was about languages that are taught, and it mentions English a few times and Gaelic and Spanish, and it talks about teaching the national language. So that tells me whatever language that most people in that country speak is usually taught in school. So how do I say that in my own words? I think I'll say schools usually teach their country's national language and sometimes other languages. And the last section was about the special subjects that are taught sometimes in schools, in addition to those regular ones like math and reading and science. So I want to say that a little bit differently than the text by saying some schools teach music, morals, and technology. So now I've found details from each of the 5 sections, and I want to see what things I see repeated or common thoughts in the details. So I'm going to use the details to figure out my main idea. Well, I'm noticing that I see the word learn, the word teach in many of the details. So I know that this section on schools was about how students learn and what teachers teach, and how sometimes they can be similar or different depending on where you are in the world. So I'm going to put that all together and say the main idea of this section that I read is students all over the world learn important lessons at school. So I want to write about this soon, so I need to pick the most important details. 5 details are a lot, and I want to narrow it down a little bit and pick 3 that I think are the most important. Well, if most students learn these subjects, and it's very common around the world, I think that's an important detail I want to include. And then if I think about when students go to school or where they go to school, that doesn't seem as important as how they learn their national language and some special subjects. So I think I'm going to stick with the 4th and 5th detail as being the 3 most important. Now it's your turn. You're going to do some research on another part of the Social Studies tab in PebbleGo. The part that I went into was called Culture and Awareness, and then I picked a section out of Customs Around the World. There are other sections to read about other than school, so you'll pick one that you want to read. So here's how you do that. First, you go to pebblego.com, then you enter the username ePrize, E-P-R-I-S-E, the password school, then you'll click on the Social Studies tab, then you'll click Culture and Awareness and Customs Around the World. When you do that, I'm going to back up and come over here so that you can see how to do it. Social Studies, Culture and Awareness, Customs Around the World, and then you notice there's several different choices. I chose Schools Around the World. You can choose birthdays, Christmas, clothing, food, games, homes, shopping, or transportation. Any of those that are interesting to you, you pick the one that you want to learn about the most. Then here are your instructions. You will trace your hand on a piece of paper like you've done before, but be sure to keep this one this time for the rest of the year because this writing project is going to take us a little while. You'll choose an article from the Customs Around the World section of PebbleGo. Then you'll read the article carefully and fill in 5 important details on the fingers. You'll use the details to determine the main idea of the article. Remember, the main idea is a sentence that tells what it was mostly about, not just one word. Like I didn't just say the main idea was school. Once you've determined the main idea, you'll write that sentence on the palm of your hand. Then notice all the details and what they have in common and what things are really important, and pick 3 that you think are the most important that you want to include in your writing. You'll save your traced hand with main idea and details that you did on your own to research a part of customs around the world for next week. In next week's lesson, we'll learn how to take our research and write a rough draft to explain what we've learned.